everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Morgan. This is my channel Pisces Paperbacks about Belle Révolte by Linsey Miller. I know I'm not saying the title correctly, but I literally have no idea how to say it, so I'm just gonna go with Belle Révolte because I can say that. Belle Révolte is a YA fantasy novel that was released on February 1st. It is a Prince and the Pauper kind of reimagining with Emily, the daughter of a noble family, and Annette, who is the very, very poor daughter of, I don't know, poor people. I don't remember her parents. I don't ever think they talk about her parents' jobs. Emily is being sent to this finishing school for girls where she's going to be taught the midnight arts. Midnight arts are the more feminine, magical things that include illusions, scrying, and divination. But she really wants to study the noonday arts, which are like healing magic and fighting magic. So those are typically boys' magic. So Emily is on her way to this school and she finds Annette, who is a very poor girl who can't afford to be taught the midnight arts, but she desperately wants to learn. And so Annette and Emily decide to switch places so that Annette can go to this finishing school in Emily's place and Emily can go study healing magic and become a physician. At the same time this is all happening, the nation where they live, which is a historically French history inspired fantasy land whose name I cannot remember, is undergoing some political turmoil. There is a radical group known as Laurel that are pointing out inequalities between the upper class and the lower class and just the depth of those differences and trying to rile up some sort of political change. This book has a lot of great themes regarding class discrimination, exploitation of the poor by the wealthy to maintain power. There's an asexual character that has her own little character arc about that I thought was really well done. There's also a background female-female romance and a pretty significant trans side character. And I thought all of those instances of representation were great. I really liked a lot of the discussion about class and why the magic system was so gendered and why maybe it shouldn't be that way, and it's not supposed to be that way, it's just that's the way society has turned it into, which I think is a really good analogy for like gender and all that. Unfortunately, I wasn't a huge fan of this book, and I'm gonna try and kind of alternate positive and negative points throughout my review so it's not overwhelmingly negative. I did give this book 2.5 stars. I don't think it's bad. I actually quite liked the last third. I thought it was really action-packed and interesting. I just have a lot of underlying problems that I couldn't really justify giving it a higher score. One of the biggest strengths of this book is definitely the writing. I really liked the writing. I thought there were a lot of great kind of analogies and like one-liners about class and things like that. One that I really liked that I have here on my computer is, "Small steps away from the ocean might have seemed like progress to those farther from the water, but when high tide came in, others would still drown." And that's kind of in the context of talking about the wealthy being willing to see change happen, but have it happen at a slow rate because like society will crumble if everything is overthrown all at once. So that kind of writing I really enjoyed. There's a lot of really great lines like that in there. I also think the dialogue was another strength of the book. In certain parts there's a lot of like great like fast banter. It was actually quite funny. In other parts, I feel like the dialogue was a little bit too on the nose. It felt a lot like the characters were telling us what we're supposed to be feeling and what we were supposed to be interpreting from the book, instead of really letting the actions and the underlying subtleties of the dialogue speak for themselves. I also think the main two characters are quite strong. Emily is stubborn and confident and really knows what she wants and is going for it, whereas Annette is a little bit more cautious. But Annette really stands up for herself in terms of her beliefs. So I think those two characters are really developed well. I also think that by the end of the book, there are quite a few side characters I cared about a lot. However, it took until the end of the book for me to care about a lot of the side characters, and they really didn't develop much personality except for one or two. And I think a lot of that is because this book takes place in two perspectives, so each chapter alternates from Annette's perspective or Emily's perspective, and the storylines in each of those parts really don't interact until like the very end of the book. They're very separate stories, and I think by keeping them so separate, I started to, you care about one story more than the other, whereas I feel like if they had interacted a little bit more and the side characters had maybe interacted a bit more and the whole thing was a bit more tied together, I would have cared more about the relationships between all of them instead of just the main characters and some of the other people. Do you want to come up? Do you want to come up? Thank you. Oop, sorry. So I definitely think the writing and the characters and the representation that the characters provide the story are all the strengths of the book. Unfortunately, I had major issues with the pacing and the world building. In terms of pacing, I felt like this book was so fucking rushed. Like, I feel like this book needed at least 50 more pages at the beginning and maybe another 75 pages interspersed throughout the rest of the book. When I was describing the plot to you where these two girls decide to switch places so that they can study at the different schools, that plot happens in like the first 2 chapters. And I'm a fan of books that jump into the action, but they jump into the action and then take the time to really establish like a connection between the characters or a justification for the plot happening. And these characters literally meet in the first chapter, decide to switch places, and then over the course of maybe a 2-page conversation, I'm supposed to believe that they have like this some sort of bond that is going to like make this all work out. And it was just very rushed. It took a long time for me to believe that like they would even do something like this, especially again since the 2 storylines, we really don't see Emily and Annette talk that often. The pacing was also off for me because I couldn't really tell how much time was passing between major political events. It felt like they were happening every day because the in-between periods where these 2 girls were attending classes and going to school and kind of learning about their magic were all offhanded sentences, kind of like describing what they were doing but not really going into depth, and then suddenly there was something else happening. And I know that's like important to keep the plot moving, but it felt like the plot was moving too fast without laying any foundation for why they were even studying. And that really leads into my biggest problem with the book, which is the world building. I have no problem with the fact that this book was heavily inspired by French history, but I feel like the fact that there are French words in the book and like there's just some things that maybe could have been changed to differentiate the book a little bit more from real France. And I don't think that this was really going to bother anybody else, but in the book the king's name is King Henry XII, and it would have been, and it just makes me think of like King Henry VIII and all the King Henrys of England and that like actually lived. And I don't know how many King Henrys France had. I mean, they had a lot of King Louis, but I don't know. But I just feel like just picking like maybe a little bit more fantastical of a name would have done a lot to really solidify this book as not happening in not being like historical fantasy. And I just feel like it needed a little bit more differentiation. And as the political subplots of the book really come into the foreground, the history of the nation is also brought up several times, and yet I still really have no idea how it happened. There's something to do with 12 like noble founding families, and Emily is from one of those families, but I really didn't get the history. I didn't feel like that was really explained very well, and it was kind of hard to understand once the political histories of the country started coming into play in the current political disruption. However, my biggest complaint is honestly the magic system. I thought of this like the other day while I was trying to figure out how I was going to phrase this, and I think the way I really want to say it is that the book treats magic like a soft magic system where the narrative uses the magic like a hard magic system. Soft magic systems are really kind of, they're more meant to create a sense of wonder and just, there's not really that much explanation as to how it works, like Harry Potter, whereas hard magic systems are really, they follow specific rules and there are like specific mechanics as to how the magic works. And the weird juxtaposition of the book not really telling you how the magic system works while the characters clearly have very specific rules that they're following to do this magic was very jarring. Some questions that I had. How common is it to be a magic user? How common is it to not be able to use magic? There's a lot of talk about channeling magic, but how does channeling magic work? Like, why does it work differently with the midnight arts and the noonday arts? Is it even different between the noonday arts and the midnight arts? We know that there are physical consequences to using magic. For example, if somebody is scrying for too long, their skin will start to burn if on the bowl that they're using to scry. But that's just one example. Like, what are the physical consequences of using magic? How do those work? Why do they change depending on, like, the scene and, like, how injured the author needs the character to be? And if there are these physical consequences, the book talks about magic users burning out pretty quickly, but then there's also other magic users who, you know, aren't the nobles who channel their magic through other people so that they don't burn out quickly enough, but, like, or they don't burn out so fast, but there are people who don't seem to do that, but they're not burning out that fast. So theoretically, like, how old do magic users live to be? And can you be a magic user and not study any of the magic and not go to either of the schools? And these are just some of my questions, and I feel like a big problem that could have been answered about all of this is literally showing any of the magic classes that either of the girls go to. There are no scenes where there are classes just like, it would have been so easy to put in one scene at the Midnight Arts School where the teacher is like, and now we're gonna learn how to scry, and this is how you do this, but remember, there are physical consequences, and like, that would have answered all my questions. But because we don't get that, the method of channeling and the way that magic is kind of appears throughout the story, it keeps changing to a point where I really didn't have a grasp on how magic worked at all. And in a story where magic was like literally the root of the plot, I don't see how that could have worked out. I wish it was just elaborated on a lot more, because it was interesting. It was really interesting to see the different types of magic, like the healing magic and the more illusion-based magic. Also, there are like no illusions that either of the main characters use, and I feel like that's like really cool. I would have liked to see that more. At this point, I'm just ranting a little bit, but honestly, the world building and so many of my questions are one of the biggest problems that I had with this book. I'm definitely, you know, interested in to see what this author is going to put out. I know she also has a duology. I don't remember the name of it, but I'm interested, and if I go look and see and the description interests me, I wouldn't have any problem picking those up and checking them out. But this book was definitely not my fave. Some things I want to point out. The first chapter where we meet Annette, the poor girl versus the noble. So Annette, the first chapter that we meet her, the very first sentence we ever hear her say was, "I ate dirt as a child." And I just feel like that's a little heavy-handed. Personally. There's also a scene where Annette is arguing with the teacher at her nice finishing school for ladies, and one line that she says is, "I don't know how to explain that I care about other people's well-being." And I saw that and was like, oh, that's a Huffington Post headline. Like, that's like a tweet meme that I saw on Twitter. That's just weird that it's there. Again, I want to say, I didn't hate this book. I thought that the characters and the relationships between the characters, especially the relationships that Annette and Emily both develop with their kind of guardian figure, I really, really enjoyed them. I really liked the main characters themselves. I liked the relationships that developed in the book. But outside of those specific things, I just had a lot of trouble with the rest of the world and the way that that world interacted with the magic system and the plot. I think I'm gonna call it in terms of this review. Let me know what you think, if you think you might pick it up, because honestly, I still think that it's a worthwhile book, and if people are interested, they should still check it out. I am going to say one spoiler after I say goodbye. So it is like a major plot thing, and if you don't want to read it, then stay for like this 3 seconds of me complaining. But if you are interested, I definitely say don't watch a spoiler, and I will see you guys next time. Bye! Okay, if you stuck around, you're gonna tell me that I wasn't supposed to guess that the guy named Lawrence is part of Running Laurel? Like, are you kidding me? Is that not obvious? Was I supposed to be surprised? Like, I know it's a part of his character that he constantly complains about politics and he would never get involved with politics. But like, I was never once misled that he wasn't gonna be Laurel. It bugged me.